follow along the same lines with the last two questions. I was going to ask about what you think about the future of the Patriot Act, since it seems that Washington has kind of become reliant on it and various intelligence gathering agencies have become dependent upon it. Do you think that when it comes up, when various aspects come up for re-ratification, that Congress, or as you explained, the executive branch will continue?
Number one, I think the Patriot Act is a symbol of the national security state that was erected post 9/11, because its particular provisions are far less menacing than the Military Commissions Act of 2006, which was truly horrifying. That's the suspension of habeas corpus, enemy combatants, whatever. The major defect in the Patriot Act, it had some sensible things, was authorizing the FBI unilaterally to obtain all of your business records, library records, whatever, without any judicial supervision. They just issue what they call administrative subpoenas. Initially, the act was so bad, if you got an administrative subpoena, it became illegal to even talk to an attorney that you had a problem with it and wanted to challenge it in court. Can you imagine that, drafting a law, making it illegal to consult about your legal rights? And you couldn't even identify yourselves when you went into court to challenge the constitutionality. Ultimately, the courts threw this out, and Congress had to change it. It's a case that stemmed from a library in Connecticut challenging the constitutionality of this particular provision. But that's the main issue here, is this administrative subpoena authority, because it's used every day, will be extended. But the larger issue isn't just that. I say it's the other things, like the amendments to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which basically authorize the government to intercept all of your emails and conversations without warrant, saying, since this is how the statute reads, and this is one, by the way, that Obama voted in favor of. It says that if the government can't establish that you're not in the United States, and I think, I'm not a technological genius, I think if you're using email, you can't readily identify where you're sending the email from. It's not like a phone number. Then, if they have some belief that you're outside the United States, then they don't need any warrant to spy on you. They can intercept your conversations and do whatever they want with it. They don't have to have any suspicion that you're engaged in any wrongdoing or any crime whatsoever. And they authorize what would in the old times be called a general warrant, or a writ of assistance, that enables the government to ask for a blanket authority to intercept conversations going between any 2 points, no matter who the callers are. And that is, Obama voted in favor of it, and he's not asking for its repeal. That's far more dangerous than the Patriot Act. But I understand your question really was this whole complex of authorities that are all, which can be repealed at any time. I mean, remember, there's nothing that says to Congress, once they pass the law, you can't even think about repealing it until the sunset comes. No, you can walk and chew gum at the same time, and you can repeal it earlier, I can guarantee you there's nothing in the Constitution that says Congress has to wait for the idiocy to have its full shelf life before it makes up to its senses. But I don't see there's no impetus in Congress to change any of this. And to me, what's most alarming is, why isn't Obama, some of these things Obama did oppose, the Military Commissions Act, why isn't he asking for it to be repealed? Or do you need those powers? Why do you're saying that you repudiated Bush, then how come you're claiming and using all the powers he had? Other than deciding he'd call people in Guantanamo by a different name. Rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So I don't, and also what is equally alarming is the American people aren't clamoring, say, get rid of this stuff. We want a new leaf here. We want a new chapter in the United States. Don't make us frightened. Don't inflate all the danger here. We all condemn 9/11. These are abominations, but there are bad things that happen in the United States all the time. We don't encourage them. We're as prudent as we can, but we know the only way you can have a risk-free life is to destroy all liberty. If you want to eliminate any conceivable evil that human beings can commit, just destroy the human race, right? Hey, this is great. We've now got it. No evil anymore in the world, because we're all dead. We understand the absurdity of that. Yet this is the mentality that goes, okay, do anything to try to minimize risk. No, we do things that are prudent to minimize risk, but no. We know we can't, as human beings, given our flawed ability to understand human nature, identify every conceivable risk we don't want to try.
Bruce, would you mind touching on the economic aspects of all the empire spending, especially combined with all the stimulus bailout plans, and especially the effect on young people in the long run on this thing?
Yeah. the costs of our empire are truly staggering. Afghanistan, Iraq, putting aside the 135 other military bases, we're talking about $1 trillion. $1 trillion. And what have we gotten? I mean, if we're trying, even Bernie Madoff's investments look good compared to that. We got Afghanistan, where it's a crime for a woman to say, I don't want to have sex to her husband. And that's what we get for $1 trillion. In Iraq, what's there? Sectarian killings and whatever. So that's a staggering, that's dead weight. It gets us nothing. And we also have now, with the bailout, equal trillions that's all being borrowed. I guess the budget deficits over the next years are estimated to fall somewhere between $9 trillion and $7 trillion. Who's going to pay for this? It's typical that politicians will want to foist all the burden on somebody else. Hey, we'll let our successors bear the burden, which is all of the youth here today and your children. Somebody's going to have to pay for that debt. It can't be foisted off indefinitely. And that by itself, I think, demonstrates how dangerously close we are to be getting on a permanent trajectory of empire that's going to lead to the destruction of the United States every bit as much as Rome was sacked in 410 AD by Alaric the Great. And that is the refusal to be inspired by the fact that the reason why we have our freedoms and liberties is because there were those hundreds of years ago that risked that last full measure of devotion because they cared about liberty coming after them. Those are the people at Valley Forge Cemetery Ridge, writing the Constitution, being serious. And they wrote and they said, you read those Founding Fathers' papers. And they say, we must succeed. We must sacrifice so that we make sure that freedom lives. It's not discredited and we don't end up being a monarch. And they did sacrifice. They didn't watch video games or whatever, American Idol, and this kind of triviality. And James Madison, he took every single book ever written on confederations before he went to the Constitutional Convention and read them. So he would be a master of how you could architect the Constitution to preserve freedom and liberty. They made sacrifice. And we need to appreciate that and make sacrifices ourselves so that our children and posterity will inherit freedom as well, not $8 trillion debts and an empire and a concentration of power in the executive that reduces the Congress and the people to inkblots. Because if we don't, no one else will. We're already very far down the road. If you read Gibbon's Decline and Fall of Rome, it takes 123 chapters to get through his 1,500-page tome. What we're at about chapter 99. Got 24 chapters to go. It's time to turn it around. Oftentimes history is very flukish and things happen that you don't expect. But only if we stand up and call the bluff. We are living in a delusion. Inflated fears, belief that, we'll be here forever because we're strong. Reminds me of the British. They were ecstatic, celebrating the high point of the British Empire, Queen Victoria's Silver Jubilee. Britain forever will be the empire, and within 20 years they were crumbled. They were nothing because of the overreach and that attitude as well that they had of arrogance, insufferable arrogance. And so that's what these bailout, these expenditures mean. Okay, it's not up to us to protect those yet to be born. Those yet to be born, they don't make political contributions. They don't vote. Who cares about it? Eat, drink, and be married tomorrow. We'll die. Let somebody else pick up after us. And in fact, this is if you want to understand one of the elements of history that in my judgment is tragic, is those who are guilty of the greatest sins leading to the crumbling of a republic aren't going to be around when it finally collapses. When you look at those who suffered at the sacking of Rome in 410, the real culprits lived centuries earlier, who set in train the attitudes and the psychology that led to the crumbling of the Roman Republic and the rise of the empire, and then everyone saying, it's too much of a bother to guard the borders, we'll let the barbarians do it, until the barbarians knew they could march two ways, to and from Rome.